In 1943, a train screeched to a halt at the gates of Auschwitz. Around 100 prisoners of war were lined up, their faces pale, lips murmuring prayers. They knew the man standing before them, tall, sharply dressed in an ironed SS uniform, was no ordinary officer. He was their judge, jury, and for many, their executioner. They didn't know his name, but they would soon come to fear it. Josef Mengele, the angel of death. Josef Mengele was born in 1911 in Günzburg, Germany. As a young man, his life was relatively ordinary. But by the age of 18, something changed. He became obsessed with academic success, particularly in medicine and anthropology. In 1930, he enrolled in medical school. But alongside his medical studies, another interest was quietly growing: politics. He was drawn to the twisted ideals of racial purity promoted by the Nazi Party. Even in his teenage writings, Mengele expressed disturbing thoughts that people with physical or mental disabilities should be removed from society so the strong could thrive. Chillingly, this ideology would become a perfect match for the Nazi regime. In the early 1930s, Josef Mengele pursued advanced studies in Germany, a time when dangerous and divisive ideologies were gaining traction. By 1930, he earned a PhD focusing on theories that were later universally discredited by science and condemned for their role in fostering prejudice and hatred. These ideas, rooted in the era's extremist movements, reflected the troubling undercurrents of the time. In 1938, Mengele joined the Waffen-SS, a paramilitary organization tied to the Nazi Party, which played a significant role in the spread of oppressive policies. Deployed to the Eastern Front during World War II, he participated in intense combat against Soviet forces. However, a battlefield injury forced his return to Germany, marking a turning point in his career. It was there, in the shadow of a war fueled by intolerance, that his later actions would cement his place in history as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked extremism and the importance of upholding human dignity. In 1943, Mengele was assigned to Auschwitz, the largest Nazi death camp. There, he found his perfect laboratory, a hidden facility near railway lines away from the public eye. Here, he had complete freedom to perform human experiments, no oversight, no ethics, no mercy. When new prisoners arrived by train, Mengele would calmly stand at the platform and select who lived and who died. A flick of the finger to the left meant death in the gas chambers. To the right, medical experiments. And to him, it wasn't murder. It was research. Mengele's favorite subjects were twins. He believed studying them could unlock the secrets of genetics and racial purity. He would inject them with chemicals, infect one and not the other, then compare the results. If one died, which often happened, the other was killed too, so he could dissect both bodies side by side. Other experiments were even more grotesque. He would amputate limbs to observe regrowth, inject dyes into children's eyes to attempt to change their color, and perform unnecessary surgeries, often without anesthesia. Some pregnant women were injected with cement or other substances to induce miscarriage, just to see what would happen. One day, a 15-year-old girl broke down in front of Mengele, screaming that she couldn't take it anymore. Calm as ever, he took her hand and led her away. She disappeared for days. When she returned, she was paralyzed. A month later, she died, her lungs scarred by toxic gas. These horrors weren't isolated incidents. Mengele performed over 500 experiments, often personally choosing his victims. He believed he was a scientist, a pioneer. But even fellow Nazi doctors condemned his work, calling it sadistic, not scientific. Yet no one could stop him. At Auschwitz, Mengele was untouchable. By 1945, the Nazi regime was collapsing. The Soviet army was closing in. Mengele fled Auschwitz, leaving behind mountains of records and evidence and thousands of victims. He managed to avoid capture, despite being one of the most wanted war criminals in the world. At first, he was detained briefly by Allied forces, but shockingly, he was released, using a false name and documents. The true monster he was remained hidden. In 1950, Mengele escaped to Argentina using a fake passport. He lived comfortably, even socializing with Nazi sympathizers who had also fled Europe. When his real identity was discovered in 1956, he fled again, this time to Brazil. There, he lived under yet another false name, working on a farm. Neighbors described him as polite and quiet, never suspecting that he was the butcher of Auschwitz. Germany, meanwhile, held trials in his absence, officially naming him one of the most hated criminals in their history, even more than Hitler in some accounts. In 1979, Josef Mengele suffered a stroke while swimming off the coast of Brazil. He died instantly, having never faced justice for his crimes. He lived over 3 decades longer than many of the children he tortured, but his legacy lives on, not as a scientist, but as a symbol of cruelty masked as science. He wasn't the angel of death. He was a man who twisted knowledge into a weapon and turned medicine into a tool of horror.